Welcome back to Major Antonio's presentation of London to Ladysmith via Pretoria by Winston S. Churchill. Today, 125 years ago, the future Prime Minister reported from the fronts of the Boer War in South Africa. We shall follow his footsteps as he narrates his adventures himself. Subscribe to our channel so as not to miss anything. Chapter 14, A Military Demonstration and Some Good News. Chieveley, January 8, 1900.
Boom, thud, thud, boom, thud, 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 boom. A long succession of queer moaning vibrations broke the stillness of the sleeping camp. I became suddenly awake. It was 2 o'clock on the morning of January 6. The full significance of the sounds came with consciousness. We had all heard them before, heavy cannonading at Ladysmith. They were at it again. How much longer would the heroic garrison be persecuted? I turned to rest once more, but the distant guns forbade sleep. The reports grew momentarily more frequent, until at last they merged into one general roar. This was new. Never before had we heard such bombarding. Louder and louder swelled the cannonade, and presently the deep note of the heavy artillery could scarcely be distinguished above the incessant discharges of field pieces. So I lay and listened. What was happening 18 miles away over the hills? Another bayonet attack by the garrison. Or perhaps a general sortie. Or perhaps, but this seemed scarcely conceivable, the Boers had hardened their hearts and were delivering the long-expected, long-threatened assault. An officer came to my tent with the daylight. Something big happening at Ladysmith. Hell of a cannonade. Never heard anything like it. Worse than Colenso. What do you think of it? But I was without opinion, nor did I find anyone anxious to pronounce. Meanwhile, the firing was maintained, and we breakfasted to its accompaniment. Until 10:30, there was not the slightest diminution or intermission. As the day advanced, however, it gradually died away, showing either that the fight was over, or, as it afterwards turned out, that it had passed into the hands of riflemen. We all spent an anxious morning speculating on the reason and result of the engagement. About noon, there arrived an unofficial message by heliograph, which the young officer at the signal station confided to his friends. It was brief. General attack all sides by Boers, everywhere repulsed, but fight still going on. At 1 o'clock, just as we're sitting down to luncheon, came an orderly at full gallop with the order for the whole force in Chieveley to turn out at once, whereat the camp, till then dormant under the midday sun, sprang to life like a disturbed anthill. Some said we were about to make a regular attack on Colenso, while many of the covering army of Boers were busy at Ladysmith. Others suggested a night assault with the bayonet. The idea was very pleasant to the hearts of the infantry, but I soon learned that no serious operation was in contemplation, and that the force was merely to make a demonstration before Colenso with the object of bringing some of the Boers back from Ladysmith, and of so relieving the pressure on Sir George White. The demonstration was, however, a very imposing affair. First of all, the mounted forces threw out a long fringe of patrols all along the front. Behind this, the squadrons made a line of black bars. The mounted infantry, Bethune's horse, and the Natal Carabineers formed the left, the South African Light Horse the center, and the 13th Hussars and Thornycroft's mounted infantry twisted back to watch the right. Behind this curtain marched the infantry, Hildyard's brigade on the right, Barton's on the left, line after line of brown men 10 yards apart, 200 yards between the lines, spreading in this open formation over a wide expanse of country, and looking a mighty swarm. Behind these again, dark blocks of artillery and wagons moved slowly forward. Behind, and above all, the naval battery began to throw its shells into the village. The cavalry soon cleared the front. The squadrons wheeled about, the patrols retreated. The South African Light Horse, with whom I now have the honor to serve, were stationed in rear of Gun Hill, a rocky eminence so called because a heavy battery was placed there in the last engagement. From this feature, an excellent view of the operation was afforded, and thence we watched the whole development. Sir Francis Cleary, General Hildyard, and their respective staffs had also taken their position on Gun Hill, so that its crest was thickly crowded with figures peering exhaustively through field glasses and telescopes. The infantry, who were now moving steadily forward, were literally sprinkled all over the country. In the textbooks compiled from the results of past experience, the military student reads that armies divide to march and concentrate to fight. Nous avons changé tout cela. Here, we concentrate to march and disperse to fight. I asked General Hildyard what formation his brigade was in. He replied, "Formation for taking advantage of ant heaps. This is a valuable addition to the infantry drill." Meanwhile, the demonstration was in progress, and not without effect. Only the well-informed realized that it was a demonstration, and the privates, as they walked phlegmatically on, did not know that they were not about to be plunged into another deluge of fire. "You watch it, Bill," I heard one man remark. "We'll have that laughing hyena," the Vickers Maxim gun, "let off at us in a minute." The Boers, too, seemed to be deceived, or at any rate doubtful, for we could see them in 2s and 3s, and presently in 5s and 6s, galloping into their trenches, which were evidently deep enough to shelter horse and man. It was most probable that larger bodies had already begun their countermarch from Ladysmith. We were not wasting our time or our trouble. The infantry halted about 3,000 yards from the enemy's position, and the artillery, which numbered 14 guns, trotted forward and came into action. All these movements, which had been very deliberately made, had taken a long time, and it was now nearly 5 o'clock. Dark thunderclouds and a drizzle of rain descended on the silent Boer position, and the range of hills along which it stretched lay in deep shadow as if under the frown of heaven. Our batteries also were ranged in this gloomy zone, but with the reserves and on the hill whence we were watching, there was bright sunlight. The bombardment and the storm broke over the Boer entrenchment simultaneously. A swift succession of fierce red flashes stabbed out from the patches of gunners, teams, and wagons, and with yellow gleams, soft white balls of smoke appeared among the houses of Colenso and above the belts of scrub which extend on either side. The noise of explosions of gun and projectile came back to us on the hill in regular order, and above them rang the startling discharges of the 4.7-inch naval guns, whose shells in bursting raised huge brown dust clouds from houses, trench, or hillside. At the same time, the thunder began to rumble, and vivid streaks of blue light scarred the somber hills. We watched the impressive spectacle in safety and the sunlight. Besides creating a diversion in favor of Ladysmith, the object of our demonstration was to make the enemy reveal his position, and especially the positions of his guns. In this latter respect, however, we were defeated. Though they must have suffered some loss and more annoyance from the bombardment, and though much of the infantry was well within the range of their guns, the Boers declined to be drawn, and during 2 hours' shelling, they did not condescend to give a single shot in reply. It needs a patient man to beat a Dutchman at waiting. So about 7 o'clock we gave up trying. It had been intended to leave the troops on the enemy's front until night and withdraw them after dark, the idea being to make him anxious lest a night attack should be designed. But as some of the battalions had turned out without having their dinners, Sir Francis Clary decided not to keep them under arms longer, and the whole force withdrew gracefully and solemnly to camp. Here we found news from Ladysmith. Enemy everywhere repulsed for the present. For the present. Hold on only a little longer, gallant garrison, and if it be in the power of 25,000 British soldiers to help you, your troubles and privations shall soon be ended, and what a dinner we will have together then. That night we tried to congratulate or encourage Ladysmith, and the searchlight perseveringly flashed the Morse code on the clouds. But before it had been working half an hour, the Boer searchlight saw it and hurried to interfere, flickering, blinking, and crossing to try to confuse the dots and dashes, and appeared to us who watched this curious aerial battle, Briton and Boer fighting each other in the sky with vibrations of ether to confuse them very effectually. Next morning, however, the sun came out for uncertain periods, and Ladysmith was able to tell her own story briefly and jerkily, but still a very satisfactory account. At 2 o'clock, according to Sir George White, the Boers in great numbers, evidently reinforced from Colenso, surprised the pickets and began a general attack on the outpost line round the town, particularly directing their efforts on Caesar's Camp and Wagon Hill. The fighting became very close, and the enemy, who had after all hardened their hearts, pushed the attack with extraordinary daring and vigor. Some of the trenches on Wagon Hill were actually taken 3 times by the assailants. But every time General Hamilton, the skillful Hamilton as he has been called, flung them out again by counterattacks. At one place, indeed, they succeeded in holding on all day. Nor was it until the dusk of the evening, when the rain and thunderstorm, which we saw hanging over Colenso, broke on Ladysmith, that Colonel Park led forth the Devon Regiment, who, having had half their officers killed or wounded by a shell some days before, were probably spiteful, and drove the Dutchmen helter-skelter at the point of the bayonet, so that by night the Boers were repulsed at every point, with necessarily great slaughter, greater at any rate than on our side. Their first experience of assaulting, encore. Battles nowadays are fought mainly with firearms, but no troops, however brave, however well directed, can enjoy the full advantage of their successes if they exclude the possibilities of cold steel, and are not prepared to maintain what they have won, if necessary, with their fists. The moral strength of an army which welcomes the closest personal encounter must exceed that of an army which depends for its victories only on being able to kill its foes at a distance. The bayonet is the most powerful weapon we possess out here. Firearms kill many of the enemy, but it is the white weapon that makes them run away. Rifles can inflict the loss, but victory depends, for us at least, on the bayonets. Of the losses we as yet know nothing, except that Lord Ava is seriously wounded, a sad item for which the only consolation is that the Empire is worth the blood of its noblest citizens. But for the general result we rejoice. Ladysmith, too, is proud and happy. Only 10,000 of us, and look what we do, a little reproachfully perhaps, for it is dull work fighting week after week without alcohol or green vegetables. Well, it looks as if their trials were very nearly over. Sir Charles Warren's division marches to Frere today. All the hospitals have been cleared ready for those who may need them. If all's well, we shall have removed the grounds of reproach by this day week. The long interval between the acts has come to an end. The warning bell has rung. Take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. The curtain is about to rise. High time, too, say the impatient audience, and with this I must agree, for, looking from my tent as I write, I can see the smoke puff bulging on Bulwana Hill as Long Tom toils through his 72nd day of bombardment, and the white wisp seems to beckon the relieving army onward.
This concludes today's reading of London to Ladysmith via Pretoria by Winston S. Churchill. Join us also on January 13th for the subsequent chapter. Subscribe to Major Antonio's channel. Thanks for listening, and so long.